Hi, Pradeep. Thank you so much for joining us on Blitz Business. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Ashish. It is a pleasure to come on and thanks for having me over.
Awesome. So, Pradeep, tell us something about yourself first.
Ashish, I am by education a chartered accountant, and I've been a chartered accountant and a cost accountant. Have been in industry for almost now 30 years, and industry segments are as wide as you take financial services, move on to oil and gas, moves on to media, and then moves on to outsourcing, moves on to financial services again, funds, and then textiles, then again a startup bug, real estate, and then I was out of the country for some time before I came back, and then we decided to kind of start Dhiway. So I have at least around 8 or 9 industry verticals in the last 30 years. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing roles which are largely publicly focused. They are listed entities in which I've been part of. So, signaling markets, apart from the finance portfolio, which is part of my portfolio, I've been into business ops and generally speaking, I've been at the level at which you can help drive a little bit of strategy for corporates. And so that's where I've spent most of my time over the last 15 years, I should say.
So, which stocks to buy, Pradeep, since you mentioned listed entities?
I, I will I will never ever give a guess on a call like this because there's a little bit of I would always suggest if you have a doubt, just get into some mutual funds and let them do the work for you because this requires a lot of time. I don't think people as busy as you have that time. So just let the experts do their job and ride on it. That's the best way to do it.
And you mentioned so many verticals, so many segments. So, which one you haven't worked in?
Now, I'll tell you, I mean, it's interesting to be a finance person handling business operations in majority of these industries because while each one has got a domain differential in
Mhm.
terms of what you learn and what you add value to, there's a common thread that goes through all of these industries. And what makes it very interesting is the ability to, piece together that story and network it into the sort of background and experience that I have.
Yeah.
That makes for a very interesting sort of uh, surgeon with any corporate. I mean, I think that's by far what I see in each of these. To tell you frankly, there are many industries I've not been part of. I mean, frankly, to answer your question, many industries I've not been part of. But I should say these 7 or 8 verticals gives you a fairly interesting focus about what you have done and probably gives you a little bit of an idea what you missed too.
So, what is your current company all about?
So the nearest analogy I keep giving people is that let's say you were the holder of an ICICI credit card, for example, and the issuer is ICICI. You are the holder, and you go to a shop and swipe the card, and so there is a verification happening at the point at which the swipe happens. You three are required for the transaction, but are not material for the transaction going through. And why? Because there's somebody called a master or a visa or an Amex who's arbitrating that trust, right? And so our story is basically about the trust platform. And if this is a very focused example of a credit card, in the non-credit card space, who actually arbitrates that trust? And who actually provides the capability for trust-based interactions? Because the more you start seeing digital interactions, the more the worry is as to who am I dealing with and what am I dealing with, and that got us thinking around 4 years ago when a couple of friends got together. Two of them largely in the tech space. I mean, two of our founders, Satish and Amar, are the tech founders. They've been talking about this area of trust for quite some time. I was in Hong Kong then, and so when I came back, this caught my attention. And along with Srividya, who's the other founder, we sat together and decided that, listen, this looks like a very interesting area because what are you trying to actually solve? the current data exchange structures don't deliver. There's a lack of identification, there's a lack of authentication, and very importantly, an ongoing assurance of the authentication that you provide on a platform. So we said, why don't we actually go create a trust platform? And that's how the whole story started. So
So give us an
we
example to help us understand what are the cases you're working.
okay. So let me just kind of, because this is an area which is important to explain, and then I'll give you a couple of use cases where we actually work on. So we decided we'll create what's called a trust platform. So November 2019, we started Dhiway Networks, and we actually hit the ground somewhere in February 2020 when we raised some money among friends and relatives and started the work. We created a layer one platform, a layer one blockchain platform. We have a trust platform which basically addresses five behaviors, right? It addresses a scalable platform, a scalability quotient. It addresses immutability, global verifiability, friction-free interaction with various platforms that you interact with, and it provides the assertion, the last state of matter. And I'll explain to you what this means. So this platform, basically to have these five behaviors, we use a blockchain, which is something that we have created like an Ethereum or a Solana. We have created a blockchain, which is a layer one blockchain called the COD. So I'll give you an example what actually happens. So while we have this platform, which is called COD, we also have an application, which is a verifiable digital credential application that works on COD. So let me give you an example. Let's say the Institute of Chartered Accountants was issuing a certificate to a chartered accountant. And let's say they were on this platform. Typically, what would happen is that this particular institute would then run through my stack, because my stack will be right in front. They give a holder of the certificate a digital verifiable credential, which then can be used in various formats in various types of situations, and it can be verified globally. The good thing about this is that the person who's the holder himself cannot make any changes on the certificate unless it comes through a protocol which is issuer dominated, right? So what does this actually give the capability is, you're all the time, Ashish, while you live your life, you're all the time telling people that you're Ashish, I'm from so and so, this is my date of birth, ye hamara Aadhaar card hai. This is all the time you're trying to verify your credentials, and you may have 20, 30 credentials that are high intensity credentials that you keep on verifying. Now, let's say if all of this were to go down a normal verification path today, it will probably take you a lot of money and a lot of time, very importantly. And so, what this platform helps you achieve, one of the things that it helps you achieve, is very quickly being able to verify your credentials, very quickly being able to do a machine to machine verification, very importantly, being able to tell proactively the user. Let's say you go for a job to IBM and IBM is using your credential, and it tells IBM on a proactive basis that if there is a change in this credential, it will proactively give out a shout to them saying that this change has happened. How does it matter? Because let's say, I'll give you a very simple example. You employ a driver gets a job based on a driving license, and tomorrow the driving license doesn't exist. It gives a proactive broadcast to the person who relied on that assertion to give a job to the driver, saying that that doesn't exist anymore. And that could be very critical for certain types of applications, right? This is one example, but there are many, many examples in which the last state of matter, as we call it, कि इसका हालत क्या है अभी, meaning what is the assertion and what is the state of that assertion at the moment. It's very important to verify that in various types of applications. So here we are. We've give me a second. We've got five large use cases that we address, right? One is in the area of digital commerce. The second is in the area of digital payments. The third is in the area of skills. The fourth is in the area of education. And fifth is in the area of workplace.
So, Pradeep, that is understood. But tell us what is the on-ground reality, right? In terms of have you implemented
So
real
these
use
are
case, actual customer? Because I'll tell you what the feedback we have got from market. In terms of we had multiple blockchain companies, right? So there was a hype at certain point in time about blockchain, but there were many companies who were not able to deliver the product, right? And we have seen like tons of them, like many have come over the past year. So for you on ground, what's really happening in terms of are any actual deployments happening using what are the challenges? Because in the end, yes, blockchain can help, but in many of the practical cases, people say, what is the point? A simple service can also be utilized, etc., etc. That's the second part. But for you as a company, what is the on-ground reality implementation scenario?
Yeah. So very, very interesting question, Ashish, because we have been now 4 years at it. And I can tell you with a great degree of confidence that the problem with the blockchain implementations in the past is one, it is typically the tail wagging the dog because it's been highly distracting. If you start bringing the concept of a crypto and a coin into every blockchain sort of an application, it becomes very difficult for us to actually concentrate on the use case. And blockchain typically should be driven by use cases. So let me help you explain what the use cases are. I was talking about digital commerce, for example. So we have instantiated a blockchain for the ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce. It's called Confidex. It's been a soft launch has already been announced in the sense that ONDC has come out talking about it. And that will be a large trust framework that is owned by the ONDC, which we have instantiated. That's coming out in public space probably in another month or so. There will be a formal announcement from the ONDC side. We've helped create it. Now, what does that trust framework actually do? It helps in making a lot of interactions on the marketplace which ONDC is creating become trustable. It helps to create that registry. It creates what's called a very, very clear open space for people to interact. Because today, what is happening largely in the digital commerce space is that we find that the experience is largely curated, right? What the marketplace that is thought to be achieved through the digital marketplace ONDC is wanting to bring in is what we call an egalitarian marketplace, where the suppliers have a very interesting way in which they can engage on those marketplaces without necessarily being constrained. For that, you necessarily require a trust framework. Another example that I will give you is, for example, we are now in a project with the NPCI, which you know is on the digital payment side, the UPI people. We are doing a project with them, which is called the tokenization of financial assets for the country. It's a very large project. It is RBI mandated, and our NPCI is currently on a POC. We have completed the phases of the POC, and it's likely to come out. I don't know what it's going to be called, but it's again instantiated through our technology, which is code. It will be called any particular name. I don't know. It's not yet been announced. But having said that, that's another large instantiation because these are all country level sort of instantiations. The third is, and for purposes of confidentiality, I don't want to name the company, but we have a very large collaboration that is likely to be announced in the public space shortly about an interaction with a large KYC company, which is one of the largest in India. In that interaction, what we're doing is again instantiating a chain for them. Well, to your point, was it easy to instantiate these chains? It wasn't easy. It has been a 3-4 year sort of a, I won't say a struggle. It's more of an evangelizing, I should say, for people to understand what the chain means and the fact that there are use cases which have the capability to then drive what we call certain benefits that come both not just on optimization on time and cost, it's also efficiencies in the way applications are written. Because here's a platform on which we actually urge a lot of people to build their applications on. We've created an application called the Mark Studio, which is a digital credential verification application, but it is so simple in philosophy that every industry that you can talk about has a use case on it and can develop on it. Some of the things that some of the industries that I can talk to you about is one which is agri-tech, the second which is anti-money laundering as an industry, pharma can use it, textiles can use it. I mean, there's a humongous capability for logistics to use it. I should say that the Aadhaar folks and the Parivahan folks can use the same Confidex exchange because it's largely an India-based exchange. So if there was a requirement for a trust framework, and if that was the missing bit in the whole India piece, I think we have filled that gap and we have instantiated these chains largely for any of them who want to actually use it. We have put it out in public space. By the way, the basic platform is also open source, and so it's available for many, many, many people to build on. We're very confident that over the next couple of years, this is going to start getting central place, and it's going to help in building a lot of efficiencies in which applications are built. It's a different matter that today we are cohorting in the sense that we are concentrating largely on building the rails. And all these chains that I'm talking to you about, all of these are instantiations for building the rails. So while we build the highway and the rails on the digital sides, we are urging the different types of cars and the different types of euphemism for applications to come on and use the highway so that they can actually gain greater benefits by use of the
So
highway itself.
let's shift gear, Pradeep. Let me ask you something little more controversial. Okay. So what are those two three companies which you feel are um, in your segment? How should I put it diligently? What are the top two three companies which turned out to be uh, let's say which didn't deliver on the promises in blockchain, because there are many people who spoiled the market. So what are these two three companies which
See, I think I don't even need to mention the names. I think it's not fair to do that. But I can tell you something that there are many companies in this space who have just conceptualized. I'm not even talking about made a blockchain, conceptualized a blockchain, and have been out there actually actively sourcing funds and have come to grief. And that's not good for the industry because as much as we speak about the chain, I mean, we're not talking about conceptual chains. Today we have 22 million blocks on our platform. I mean, we are not talking about a conceptual chain. It's actually working. We're talking about at least 500,000 credentials out there in the credential, verifiable digital credential space. So that's also not something that we are conceptualizing. These are things that are happening, right? We work very closely with the backend protocol. We work closely with Xstep. We work very closely with, as I told you, the NPCI, the ONDC. We work closely with many of those large agencies. I mean, we have made enough and more presentations to the RBI, the RBI Innovation Cell. So they're all aware about what's happening. They're very excited about what's happening. And I think we're very happy that they've all warmed up very quickly to the idea of a trust framework and the fact that it can be put in public space in a very large way. I don't want to name these companies because many of them could be even consulting companies who have spent a lot of money trying to bring this concept of a blockchain without actually uh, ensuring that, hey, is there a blockchain out there that is less distracted than the current blockchains that largely are very crypto based. We took a very conscious call initially that we will be crypto less, right? We don't have a listed token. So that's a very interesting part of our chain. We would not list a token. And that's something that we're very clear about because the initial use cases that are all coming are those use cases which are so critical from a country infrastructure standpoint. It's very critical. And so we want the rails to be established. We want to ensure that people use the chain. We want to ensure that there is a lot of activity that builds up cohorts on the chain that will definitely start giving a lot of very interesting attributes, capabilities to people building applications. So our concentration has been in the last 3 4 years. Believe me, it's not been easy. We've been evangelizing, and now we are starting to come to fruition. There are umpteen companies that have been out there, to your question, which have actually come in there, raise money, maybe companies who have been talking about the chain, but really nothing much has really taken off. This is an India chain made by Indians in global standards, available to the globe. We're very proud to state.
So how easy or difficult has been to work with government? Because in government, people are little skeptical in terms of, because tenders and there's a process, it's a
Yeah.
long process. So what has been your experience?
See, our experience has been that yes, it is. It takes a lot of convincing. There are many stages to go through, and I'm not for a moment complaining because, frankly speaking, they deal with variables which are multifold and from all sections, right? I mean, they have a sort of view and visibility that we probably don't have in terms of all the various variables. And to that extent, they have taken their time and maybe rightly so. But once they decide and once they're clear about the antecedents and they're very clear that it's clean and they're very clear that this delivers, they move pretty quickly, right? And I think that's something that we've seen. We have had a 3 4 year work along with them. I mean, to tell you frankly, we also issue uh, verifiable digital credentials for the Indian Army, right? And it's not something that happens overnight, but they take their precautions for what it needs to be and absolutely justified from their standpoint. But I should say that we have also learned a lot from our interaction with the government in terms of what are the things that we should also take care of. What are the things that we should be very clear about when we are interacting, because they flag off things that we haven't seen and we actually correct and go back. So it's been very iterative, not been easy, but worth the wait. And really, I'm looking forward to the government taking this wholeheartedly and actually utilizing it's open source, right? And so there's a lot of things that you've delivered out there from our stable, which is fairly open source for them to actually use. So I think the whole interaction has been, from our standpoint, very, very, very valuable to us as a company. It's helped us do a lot of course correction for us too. And definitely, I mean, I think we will see the benefit of it, not just for our company. I mean, we are an open source, so we'll see a lot of benefit to a lot of applications in that space which is coming onto the platform. It's going to be a very different 3-4 years from today in all the various interactions that we see. And we are interacting with a lot of government bodies. We are interacting with a lot of state governments. And so many of them are aware about what we do.
And Pradeep, what are the uh, companies you really aspire to become? What are those development in this segment people may not be aware of? Your top 2, 3 picks. Companies which are really doing amazing work in this space.
So, if you start looking across the borders, because I don't see any company really in India which is doing the sort of work that we are doing in this open source space, building out a cryptoless trust-based framework.
No, no.
With,
Apart from trustless, also globally, what are the top 2, 3?
oh,
Apart
oh,
not from your segment,
if you're
any
talking about aspirational companies,
aspirational which are really doing good work and people may not be aware. So you may like to share, in terms of these are some amazing work happening in this blockchain segment as per se.
see, across the bay, there are many companies which have and they're far more advanced than we are in terms of you don't need to evangelize these concepts there, right? I mean, they know it, they have been there. There's a lot of companies out there that are using a lot of the SDG goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're trying to integrate and create the benefit of these platforms for their own businesses. I'll give you one example. Again, I don't want to name companies because it's not nice to do a specific call out
You
of
can name
company.
the companies, fine. I mean, we are praising them anyway.
No, but I don't want to give specific call outs, but I'll tell you the industry so you'll pick up some of these aspects. So, in the agri-tech space, right, for example, I mean, we have had a very interesting interaction with a company that's in the agri-tech space, which is into soil sensors, for example, right? And this is now fairly widely used abroad also. Soil sensors give rise to a lot of data, and the people who normally spend for these sensors, as much as we would think it's the farmers who spend for it, is actually a lot of developmental agencies who are actually spending a lot of money on putting the sensors out there. A lot of data gets generated, and this data gets into distributed ledgers because that was a request from uh, one of them to us. And when they get into a distributed ledger, where I see a lot of interesting activity happening, carbon credits, for example, right? It's a largely amorphous area, and which is the largest carbon credit creator. It is agri space, which will create a lot of carbon credits. Who will use it? Maybe aviation will use it because they actually pollute, and so they will have to buy carbon credits. You see a lot of network impacts creating companies out there that actually will leverage this trust frameworks. If you look at it in another space, I'll come to India. A lot of crop insurance that is spent, right? A lot of the state governments and central governments pay the crop insurance for to the insurance companies for farmers. Now, a lot of them are not even aware when they're actually providing the insurance for crop losses, whether there's actually been anything growing on the land. There's a lot of network capabilities that can help them address it. So these are not small network effects. I mean, you take the whole agri value chain, a lot of them drive a lot of the benefits on distributed ledgers that are created in this space. Now, this is coming up in a big way in India. It's coming up in a very large way. But you will start seeing that the trust frameworks are going to be called in everywhere. Outside the country, I mean, usual suspects are maybe I can name an Ethereum or I can name a Solano, Hedera. They could be very, very specific to an NFT or smart contracts. Use cases are wide and many, right? One of the things that got the NPCI to use our chain, we have a fairly quick, large chain. I mean, we are talking in the region of 4 billion transactions per day. These are not small systems, they're highly scalable systems. And so they've actually moved over from an existing chain to our chain to try and understand how this works in their context. So for us, it's been interesting to track some of the companies outside from a standpoint of scalability, and some of them are fairly large. One of the things that we don't do currently is we don't actually hinge the whole story on a token that is going to be listed and that's going to be running in, because two things drive that impossibility. One is the total cost of ownership for people who come to the system starts becoming very unclear, because today you enter with a token which is at X, tomorrow the token is 10X. The people who come in very unwittingly figure out that this is not what they bargained for. And one of the questions that you had asked earlier, why have these blockchains not really taken off? This is one of the very, very big reasons. Because people came in unwittingly, figured out that, hey, this is not the space for them, because what they thought was X was actually X plus Y. They decided, hey, this will not work in the long run, and they move out. We are trying to break that conundrum. We are trying to break that capability. And one of the things that create rails, I mean, whether we like it or not, one of the largest issuers of credentials is the government, right? I mean, in any system. While we are the owners of our credentials, the custodians are the government. And so we are trying to piece this infrastructure out there for them to be able to use it in a very, very easy way. So I won't be surprised one day if either the Aadhaar used it or the Parivahan used it, or one of those large institutions used it for their own purposes. So all this is good because it helps to create the cohort required in this space. Yeah, Ashish.
So what are those use cases, Pradeep, where blockchain is not needed? Abhi tak to we discussed this is what is needed, blockchain, right? What are those cases for someone to understand? These are the space, it's not needed at all. It should be a first clear filter.
So let me say when it's needed. So it addresses when it's not needed.
I
So
mean, let's do it other way because needed is like too many big list, I think. What
so
is
not
those?
not needed. Okay. So let me flip this question like the way you asked me to.
Hmm.
So effectively, if you're running a closed loop system, right, whose whose interaction with and again it's all utopia, no? Because while I say it, you will start figuring out that what is this guy talking? Because every system out there requires all of this. But let me say it for the sake of saying it. Any place where there's a closed loop system, there's no requirement for any assertion that you've made or a credential that you've created to be shared in any context. Anything that is fairly inert to the organization itself, these are systems which don't require a blockchain. And why I said I have to flip it is because in real life, this is actually utopian. Anything that you do in the real life is largely starting to get mission verified. And why I say that is because we are trying to remove the element of the human side, getting into the system and creating what's called a tamperability cohort. So with that, what actually happens is you're able to create a framework in which who's got the biggest incentive to fudge anything in that, Ashish? It's you and me, right? I mean, I've got the biggest incentive to fudge my own, credential. So what happens is when that's removed from the space in which I play, and I can only share, and when it's on the platform, it's considered non-tamperable, immutable, what we call, and globally verifiable. It creates a space which becomes a very high capability for interactions to happen very quick. Half the time applications are trying to solve for the problem of where's my data coming from, can I trust it? That portion of it gets out, you'll see efficiencies of applications move up. And that's what I was talking to you about, that today we can talk about AI, we can talk about a lot of it happening probabilistically from AI, but what is the bulwark of AI? It's a lot of data that's already in the legacy space. Now if I don't have data in the legacy space that I can trust, you will start finding out AI throwing up very strange results, right? And that's not something that you want, because it starts then getting AI to be doubted as to whether this is what we really bargain for. Some of those interventions post AI are very significant. If you take ESG, for example, it tells you which is going to be the next intervention in the ESG space. Am I going to do X technology or Y technology? A lot of that is resting on data. And if that data is not what I would call trustable, then please be cautious, because you're building your whole plan on something that could go completely awry. And these are not small numbers. Huh? We're talking about If you take an intervention in the solar space, another billions of dollars. If you're taking something in the wind space, another billions of dollars. But what is that all resting on? It's resting on the basic bulwark of data. Get your data trustable. Ensure that the rails are clean so that anything that's built on it is also clean and capable of being able to deliver results which are more consistent.
So you mentioned ESG and making data trustable. That's an interesting point. So how does someone make data trustable in ESG due to greenwashing? For example, right? I mean, it is the data reported by the company. I mean, what sort of measures can someone put in if someone says they have put in X plants in certain place? I mean, someone needs to go out there and verify it, right? I mean, what is the technology or blockchain coming in irrespective, right? I mean, this is a very manual physical process to verify ESG data. So am I missing something?
Yeah, I think the piece that you're missing is the psyche. When a technology, which is largely machine based, establishes provenance for you, the incentive for someone to actually provide data which is less than inaccurate starts reducing. Because then you're stopped at some point of time from saying that, hey, that's not my data. This is the first psyche that changes, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say I go to the National Medical Council of this country and say, guys, every doctor who's getting a license to practice will be henceforth forced to be given a digitally verifiable credential, right? That is coming through your system. The license to practice, by the way, it's required to be very clearly placed in the every institution's consulting table for everyone to actually see it.
Yes.
Now, see what actually happens from a psyche sense. Overnight, you have stopped a problem of provenance that nobody can tell tomorrow that this was not issued by me, first. Second is there is verifiability even at the point of the patient's end, right? Third, we always presume that the problem doesn't lie at the issuer's point. The problem also lies at the issuer's point. So, what I'm trying to say is you're trying to solve a problem that can very clearly establish verifiability, provenance, and an ability for you to be stopped from saying it never came out from my desk. What that does is that it tends to correct a lot of the data that's sitting in the value chain. Because today, the biggest prominent problem is when you go back, they can always go back and say that no, it was not given by us or not issued by us. Now, where does this stand? When you take, for example, I mean, I give you an example of the NMC. Now, let me give you an example of sampling. One of the things that's required in every pharma sampling, the value chain in sampling in pharma, when they take out a sample based on which you get your approvals to go ahead and sell the particular lot, right, in pharmacies. What happens is now the protocols in the US, the FDA is also saying, hey guys, the minute you come out with this sample, please ensure that you put it on a distributed ledger. Now, why are they saying that? Because tomorrow you have no chance of changing that data again. The problem invariably happens is when you go back, you're not able to establish provenance. And that's half the problem. The minute you're able to establish provenance, a lot of the recalcitrance attached to or a lot of the ability to manipulate starts reducing phenomenally. And
Let
that
me
is something that we have seen.
no, let me ask a very simple and maybe a stupid question, Pradeep, because you talked about so there are three segments we talked: that's ESG, medical, and this sampling, right? Let's talk about the medical certificate. For a company, I'm an authority, I'm issuing certificates, right? How does, from my perspective, it makes sense to go technology or technology B? I can upload to my servers, right? I am issuing it, I know myself, irrespective if I am the source, if I'm putting the wrong information. I'm talking about the source, right? I put on a blockchain or I put on a database, right? uh, how does it matter to me? Because in
Okay.
the end, I will be hitting, if someone needs to request, I can always have an API access everything and just retrieve the data point, right? If someone changes my database, that's a separate altogether, hacking everything, they came in, do that, that's a large scale operation, etc., etc. But as a issuer, right? Why should I take the pain to go through the blockchain way and just upload into a database, expose it, someone can run, check it, the query with the unique ID, present hai, nahi hai, or whatever it is, like running up a license plate or something. So,
It's an interesting question because one of the things that this is trying to solve is the person who generates the data firstly being able to change the data himself first. because all these positions are at a point of time, correct? And when you use the word data generically, we are talking about various types of companies in that space. We are
No,
not
no,
only talking about a particular type of pedigree of company, right? We're
sure.
talking about various companies in that space.
But keeping
Where,
this example in mind, like what is the difference?
like
You,
for example, let's say I think you were talking about a pharma company sample.
no, the medical. I am issuing medical certificates. The one you were saying, right? So
No,
what is
no.
the difference
There,
from my
there,
perspective?
yeah, there. For example, we are talking about. Let's take the pharma example. I mean, it's a little less sensitive to talk about because the NMC example could be a little sensitive to certain people, right? We will talk about the pharma example. Let us say there is a pharma company's requirement that when they are coming out with a drug, their ability to continuously produce a drug is contingent on a sample size which they have to clear for every lot of drug that is taken out. Correct? This sample goes through certain checks. Those checks have got parameters. Those parameters are put in by the company onto a framework. Right? What we are saying is if they are blockchain, the companies will be required to put it into that framework. And from that point onwards, they lose the ability to make any changes in that framework. That is the first thing. So, second, to your point, there is no hacking capability of something coming in and changing that number also. Correct? What happens in actuality is if there are certain requirements, and let us say companies start getting strangely focused or rather defocused from being very convenient with some data that's coming onto the chain, that capability is gone because once you declare onto the chain, that is it. You can't change it. There's a protocol attached to change. So
But
what happens in sorry, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but Pradeep, these things are also doable by software, right? As you can see, I'm not a big proponent of blockchain. People have tried to convince. I am still trying to understand what is the difference. I mean, you can make a maker checker system. You can create an audit trail log. Why to go through blockchain path? Invest all that time in a technology which still is sort of in different
Because
stage. I mean, you can do all these things through software. You can create an. I mean, you look at any banking software, right? The most sensitive bit from transaction to everything. You have every check in place, right? So even if in sampling, how is it that
see,
really the delta difference to go to a blockchain versus a normal software route?
yeah, because the type of cohort that you're creating for a type of industry is very critical. If you're talking about people who are depending on this data for certain assertions, right? The capability of a company that makes the assertion to change it is not with them. That's a very important thing. Because what you're presuming in your logic is that, hey, I've got this technology, I'm going to put it in there. You can at any point of time come and see it. But how do I know that you've not changed the data?
You can put checks. It's like saying if I'm doing a banking transaction, I can change it. No, right? There are systems and checks in places. I
So,
cannot go and randomly change or reverse a transaction. There are sets of rules and protocol.
yeah. So when this is one such protocol where it establishes a way in which you're able to position this data in a space where you can't change it. One. Secondly is if there is a capability of someone saying that, hey, somebody else made that change in that system, that is also removed out. Third, very critically, I mean, and it may not reflect on this particular use case, there are use cases in which there are many people who require this data for their own purposes, right? If you take about, let's say, the ONDC case where we have come up with a rating application, right? In the rating application, what happens is we have created a rating application where today the buyer app and the seller app is expected to put a transactions rating application onto the chain. Today, what happens is you have rating applications today also, right? What is the problem? Why do you want to put it on a chain? Well, the point is the rating application is sitting well within a particular buyer app or a seller app. It is not getting into what's called a public field, which means that if, let us say, a Gupta Kirana store was sitting on, let us say, a Grover's marketplace, his experience is sitting only with the Grover's marketplace. So let's say he moves to Big Basket. His experience rating doesn't move to Big Basket. So what we are saying is that try and get certain spaces which are available for free movement and free capability of people to see these changes. Second, this cannot be changed by anyone in that system because if you have curated marketplaces, these curated marketplaces could also make particular changes and you are not even aware about it because what you get is a curated effect. You're right to a certain extent that, well, I can get technology to address all of this. This is one such technology that addresses it, by the way.
But it's the delta, the effort and everything, the tech, what do you call the technical debt I have to bear in terms of and deploy on something where I know in like in last 5 7 decades what has done, and all these things can be managed easily with enough number of resources available in the market to manage and deal with it and create a stable application. So I mean,
So
maybe
Ashish,
one
to
day I'll
your,
get
to your,
convinced.
to your point, actually today it's not so difficult to actually port onto a chain. It's not very difficult at all. It's
True.
extremely easy. Secondly, when you're referring to the cost of the activity, it is so minuscule because if you're talking to chains which are not crypto oriented, it's not going to be too difficult for you to actually put on the chain at a cost which is completely, I wouldn't even want to mention it. It's so simple, actually speaking. But the benefits are very, very high. So, one, from the point of getting onto a system like this, it's easy fungibility. Second, the cost is not there. Third, it gives you benefits which are far in excess of what we are only counting in terms of, is there a technology bit to it? Is there something that I can through another technology use? Well, your other technology also comes at a cost. And if you compare, blockchains don't have as much a cost because there are models today in which your cost of that whole activity is far, far lesser than what you could imagine. And today it's all plug and play. By the way, I mean, we have instantiated something for ONDC, we have instantiated for NPCI. The cost of that is extremely low for them. And people coming onto the chain understand that the cost is low for them too. So I don't think that is really an issue. The point is there reusability quotient? Is there a requirement that, hey, when you guys want to actually see the last state of matter of this particular credential, does it give you? See, many of these things are not actually visible because it depends on the use case. The use case you're talking about is a little more, I should say, static, right? I have some data, I have kept it there. Our chain actually does a lot more than that. It also tells you what is the last state of that particular assertion. So if there are changes, it will actually reflect on the chain. And well, by the way, this is not available on all chains. There is proactive broadcast to the person who actually made use of the assertion. So it's a very, very pertinent, cogent tool to somebody who has that particular use case. For example, some of them may look at only static data. To that extent, maybe you ask, no, what are the conditions under which I can use this without a blockchain? Well, one of those conditions, if it's static, it's fine. But that's not the real story elsewhere. Many of them require ongoing assertion capability, which is current. And
Makes
therefore, those will actually have a very high resonance on the chain that we are building. So I agree to you to a certain extent. If you are a typical chain, may not resonate, all use cases may not resonate. But if you're on a chain like ours, which has this particular requirement, it will definitely resonate. And by
sense.
the way, I think from a standpoint of many of the requirements that are initially coming, it's largely the cohort of a rail, which means all my basic data, whether it be a Aadhaar or whether it be a Parivahan, it would be a passport or anything can get voted on this chain. And these are to be used. Like, for example, many questions get asked today as to, well, even a DigiLocker does that. Well, look at the DigiLocker data, look at its capability currently, and see whether if it can be used on this chain and it can multiply the capability of the DigiLocker data. It's got 4 5 billion pieces of information on it, and today uh, there's an upload and a download capability. So it's a little flexible in the way you look at it. Tomorrow, you can create situations where you can, if we are to use DigiLocker along with this trust platform, you could see a humongous capability increase. And so, and again, that is one platform that will again require the last state of matter. What's the
I'm
current state of the credential?
Yeah,
And
I'm
so,
sure sometime soon, they will move to, or maybe already DigiLocker and such platforms
so
move
they
to
will,
block.
they will, they will move,
But yeah,
and believe me, a lot of this has got large citizen services capability and use.
yeah,
And there is one concept which I didn't talk to you about. This concept post DPDP, there's a lot of talk on user centricity, right? You being able to be discovered, engage, and transact. And you should be able to do that from your edge device. All of this, if you need to work from an edge device, it presupposes a trust framework. And there's no way you can do it without a trust framework. So welcome to the new world. This is where it's headed. It may not be a very corporate sort of thing, but do you know something that when a corporate is trying to engage, who's it engaging with? It's engaging with you and me in various forms, shapes, and sizes.
true.
And so the user starts getting focused in this whole interaction. And he's going to determine whether he will engage or transact, which is your DPDP. And so this platform also very clearly looks at privacy as a very important aspect of this platform. The European standards are already there. DPDP will, to a large extent, will start influencing. So those days of centralized, cohorted, curated capability, we believe, is moving out. The new story is coming in, and it's largely trust framework oriented. We use blockchain as a technology for the trust framework.
There could be another interesting case, for people in relationship, build the trust on blockchain or something. Just a
Yeah.
joke.
See, actually, we believe that after a point of time, the holder is going to demand the service. Today, it's issuer led, right? After some time, the holder is going to demand it from the issuer that you have to be on the trust framework because it disadvantages him. I'll give you a simple example. Today, if you were to verify certificates, educational certificates, it takes almost 30 days and it
Yeah,
takes a humongous amount of money. Tomorrow, if it was happening in nanoseconds and it doesn't cost so much, it costs a fraction of what it costs today. Imagine a student who doesn't have that capability with a student who has the capability. He's disadvantaged. Therefore, there'll be an inflection point at which the holder will drive the capability of the trust framework to every issuer. So we will reach there soon. I mean, it's only a matter of time.
matter of time. Wonderful. Wonderful. No, awesome, Pradeep. Thank you so much for and explaining patiently.
No,
Uh,
not at all.
I I am getting better at understanding this. But wonderful, wonderful to have you, Pradeep. It was
No,
amazing. The
it is a
conversation was amazing. Thank
pleasure,
you.
pleasure talking to you, Ashish. And feel free. I mean, we do this all the time. I mean, those questions that you asked, none of it is insignificant or out of context. Absolutely in context and absolutely significant. And the way we are building it is block by block. We have
Yeah,
built the rails. We have got the country to see that, and we are very, very confident that going forward, this is going to be the new way of dealing. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for giving this time for this subject on your show. And look forward to hearing from you guys. Yeah.
definitely.